Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, Facebook land. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning to all of you who have joined us this morning for our second edition of Coffee with a Cop. It is my pleasure. I am Latousha Daniels, President, CEO of the Miami Children's Initiative, and it is just an outstanding moment to be with you this morning. I hope you guys are off to a great day. As we begin this edition or second edition of Coffee with a Cop, I've got my coffee mug right here with me. Today, I've got the green M&M cup to share with you. I hope that all of our participants got their coffee ready, because it then wouldn't be it would make sense to have coffee without a cup. And so listen, there's a lot that's been going on in our world. It's a lot that's been going on as it relates to law enforcement. We began this opportunity to have engagement with you, this Facebook Live audience, to you, our YouTube and our brand new YouTube channel. We're terribly excited about that. We began this conversation a few months back, right after the incident and the untimely and unfortunate death of George Floyd. We found it then necessary at the Miami Children's Initiative that it was significant and important to have a conversation with those who are engaged in law enforcement. And so we thought, why don't we have conversation with those who are in leadership, those who have the ability to make decisions and to be able to engage in real dialogue, so that we could see maybe that we were more alike than different. Maybe we had the opportunity or the potential to have some real conversation that would change perception and thought processes. And so with that, we started our first Coffee with the Cop with Chief Charles Press. Chief Charles Press is a white chief who is head of the Key Biscayne police force. I didn't want to go outside of ourselves. I wanted to stay within our local confines of our community. But I want you to know that we thought it was significant to talk to those here. So let me bring in my co-host who works with me on WMBM. Let me bring in Cedric Dawkins.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Listen,
and I have my coffee.
You have your coffee, sir. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome, sir. How are you this great morning?
I'm doing well. Excited for the interview.
Yes, a necessary conversation. Listen, I can see some of the comments. I see somebody say that I'm here. I'm not drinking coffee, but I'm drinking green tea. Well, listen. Well, come on right on in here with your green tea. I must admit that I sent out for Starbucks this morning. And so that's what we got going on in this
Lord. In our green.
Trusty
Starbucks.
In the camera, even though it's hid in this green cup. Listen, now it's a minute on the lips and forever on the hips, but I even got a cheese Danish over here. I mean, if you're gonna do it, you go big or you go home, right?
You're going all in.
We're going all in. All right, listen. So we don't want to waste any time. Any comments, because I'm going to take you off screen, but you're going to be able to engage. I want to encourage those who are watching with us this morning to put up your comments and your questions. Cedric will be in the background of this live feed, generating your questions, being able, and we'll later come back to this tremendously exciting guest that we have. I am so excited. I mean, he has been harder than the FBI, CIA to be able to lasso him in front of a camera, but I'm not going to talk about him. I'm not the kind that talk about you behind your back. I'm going to talk about you in front of your face. And so I'm going to bring him on screen, and I don't care that he carry a badge and a gun. I got one too. I ain't got no badge, but wait wait a minute. I'm just having fun. Wait a minute, I'm just having fun. But we're going to bring on Mr. Troy Walker. Tell me just what you know about what our guest is. Just tell us his name and where he at and who is it that
Well,
we're
I know that our guest is Troy Walker, who is the special agent in charge of the FDLE. I'll let him tell you guys what the FDLE is if you all don't, if you're not familiar with that agency. He'll take it from there.
Wonderful. All right, so Cedric, we're going to go off screen. We're not going to waste any time. We've got an hour with this gentleman. We know he's a busy gentleman. And so we're going to move through this. We got tons of questions. But again, I want to encourage our viewing audience, if you're watching, how you're watching, I want you to generate your questions. Cedric will be in the background. We've got our Nitris holding some things down as well in the background. We just thank God for the back studio that's working it out, who will be generating your questions and your comments as we move forward in this. All right, Cedric, so I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to bring on Mr. Walker to join us. Well, good morning, Mr. Troy Walker. How are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm great, and I also have my coffee. Just not as fancy, not as fancy as of a mug as you and Cedric, but nonetheless, I do have my coffee. But good morning to all your viewers, and Latasha, thank you for having me here this morning. It's an extreme pleasure and a distinct honor to be here with you all.
Absolutely, Mr. Walker. And so let me not take or steal any thunder from you. I think it is only because of relationship and connection that you've made with Liberty City and the Miami Children's Initiative that I am even vastly aware or partly aware of what you and Florida Department of Law Enforcement do. And so I want to take this moment today to properly ask some questions about who you are, what is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or FDLE, that we often hear on television, but do we really even understand and know what that organization is? I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you have a unique skin color and being and having the complexion that I don't believe you lay in a tanning bar to achieve, but I believe you just wake up with that natural complexion. What does that mean to have this complexion in the complexity of things that we have right now as it relates to police engagement with community and people of color? So we're going to dive into some of those questions and then just have some dialogue. Are you okay with that?
I'm totally fine with it. In fact, I like these discussions because I think they're healthy, and this is the only way that we grow as a community and as a people.
Great. So tell me about yourself. Who is Troy Walker? Please introduce yourself, sir.
Okay. Well, like Cedric and both Ms. Daniels stated, my name is Troy Walker. I'm the special agent in charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Miami region, which is the Southern District of Florida. FDLE is, hold on a second.
There you go. I'm sorry. That's me fumbling with something I don't have no business fumbling.
Sorry about that. I timed out. Timed out a little bit. But Florida Department of Law Enforcement is a statewide investigative agency, and we're responsible for criminal investigations, to protective operations for the governor and visiting dignitaries. We also have intelligence centers throughout the state. We provide criminal profiling services. Also, when you get those Amber Alerts late at night, that's one of our programs that we provide to the public and local law enforcement. We also investigate cyber and high-tech type investigations. And we also have this genealogy initiative. When you see these cold cases that occur, let's say 25, 30 years, and FDLE is involved, maybe working with the city of Miami and Miami-Dade PD, 9 or 10 times we work these cases through this genealogy process to be able to bring someone that committed a horrendous crime years and years ago, but we bring them to justice. Also, mutual aid. So when we have these natural disasters like hurricanes and that sort of thing, we help coordinate efforts to bring resources into our area for the benefit of the whole community. And we also have special operations, which is our SWAT team. And one of the other services that we offer is officer-involved shootings. Now, with FDLE, like I stated, it's a statewide agency. So the Miami region, which is the southern region of Florida, I'm responsible for Palm Beach County, Broward County, Miami-Dade, and Monroe, which is the largest region in the state, because in these 4 counties, we have 39% of Florida's population in 4 counties. And
I'm sorry.
And there are 67 counties in the state of Florida. So that's interesting in itself. In those 4 counties, so I have an office in West Palm Beach that services that county. I have one in Broward that services that county. Where I sit most of the time is here in Miami at our primary operations center, and then I have an office in Key West. The crimes that we investigate: violent crime, economic crime, drug crime, public integrity. That's people that's put in a position of trust, whether it be a politician, law enforcement, judge, whatever. Put in a position of public trust, and they violate that trust of the citizens that it's supposed to serve. And we work counterterrorism, domestic security, and cybercrime related cases.
So Mr. Walker, hold on.
Sure.
That's a whole lot. Look.
Yeah.
And I know this is something that you do on a regular. It kind of rolls off.
Yeah.
For those of us who need to kind of take it in bits and pieces,
Mm-hmm.
you talked about everything from terrorism, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
To public accountability of law of those who we elect in office.
Yes. Sure.
You've talked about what I have mostly known you or understand Florida FDLE to be, and that is what I call, and you correct me, I call you the police of the police, right? That you are those who, in general, and remember, I'm layman. Who then kind of do a safeguard or watchman of how the functionality of those in law enforcement function. Then you said something about genealogy, about cold cases, that comes to you. And then there's one other piece that you are accountable to the governor, that Florida Department of Law Enforcement is then accountable beyond local government, though you have jurisdiction of Key West, of Miami-Dade, and Palm Beach, which again, you just to reiterate, you say is the largest of the states, and Broward County, forgive me. So you oversee 39% of the population as it relates to oversight. That is a tremendous responsibility.
Absolutely.
And so I saw you kind of shrugged when I said that you're the police of the police, because I want to keep it relevant to kind of what the people, what's on the pulse of the people right now. So tell me, what's that functionality?
Well, I understand how sometimes it gets confusing, and a lot of citizens, they refer to us as the police of the police. That's not true, but we do have a great deal of responsibility when it comes to law enforcement here in the state of Florida, because all of your gun carrying, badge carrying cops here in the state of Florida, they get certified through our standards program, that's the non-criminal side of our organization. And they're housed at our headquarters in Tallahassee. There are reps in the field where police chiefs and sheriffs and other organizations, if they have a problem or a question about certification or standards or anything of that nature, they typically deal with our reps as opposed to dealing with me, because that's a specialized area. So I understand from that perspective. Now, on the criminal side, being that we work these types of cases and we take on the challenges of working these public corruption cases, and also the officer-involved shootings and the in-custody deaths, it
You're
does
kind of
give
going
the.
past something, Troy, Mr. Walker.
I'm sorry. Let me slow down a little bit, but
Yes, you are.
I understand
So
the
corruption,
accountability, the accountability piece,
yes.
and I
So
understand
corruption
the
and
perspective.
police involved shooting. Corruption
Sure.
and police involved shooting come directly to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. It's just understood. If a officer shoots a gun and it relates in a death or injury, just that I'm clear, FDLE is showing up. Is that what you're saying to me and saying to us?
Well, yeah, but here's the process. So in 2014 is when I took over as the SAC, the Special Agent in Charge here in Miami, and working in conjunction with Kathy, the State Attorney's Office. There was a lot of discussion and a vision to be able to have an independent agency to look at these types of issues, officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths and use of force. And if you can imagine, as a citizen, from an optics standpoint, how can a agency police themselves? From an optics standpoint.
Yeah.
So, and that's been a
national. How can the fox watch the hen house? That's what my grandmama would say. How can the fox watch the hen house?
But let me say this too, in defense of the agencies, they're more than qualified to do these types of investigations. But what I want to give the chiefs and the sheriffs here in this 4-county area, I want to give them a credit, and I want to commend them for their efforts for being visionary and understanding that the national narrative has been an outcry about these types of events. You see civil unrest in any community, in anywhere in the country, a lot of it has to do with these types of incidents because it creates a extremely emotional and tense environment. So they saw the need as well to have an independent organization. What better organization to have do it than FDLE, because we're not attached to anyone. I don't answer to the mayor of county or city. I don't answer to commissioners. I don't have any political influence on our decision making, and we're strictly independent and we're non-biased. So
I gotta say this. Forgive me. In an environment, especially as an African American woman, we live in Miami. We live in a generally Hispanic-driven population, and I don't want to discredit the ability of Black and brown people, the relationships, but I will say that it's interesting to find that we have in Miami-Dade County, Broward County, an African American man who is sitting at an interesting time in race relations, and especially as it relates to police and community relations. And so I think you just touched on something that I believe many of our watchers probably want to have conversation about. And what began this conversation of coffee with a cop? Of course, in light of all of the recent tensions, as you just mentioned, due to the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor at the hands of police, right? How do you feel, or what do you feel needs to happen? First of all, I need to cut across the grass because you on Coffee with a Cop with Latousha Daniels, right? So you know I'm country. If you don't know, welcome to City Country. I just don't know how to be fancy. I just know how to ask a direct question. And so let me ask you a question. As an African-American male leading the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, the SAC, as you said, Special Agent in Charge, what was your initial reaction and response in visualizing, as America did, the death of George Floyd? Let me start there first.
Well, I think that's a very, very good question, Latousha. And this issue is multi-layered and fairly complex. The George Floyd incident was extremely tragic, and it, in my opinion, pierced the soul of this nation, and particularly in the Black community. You know, fortunately, this incident was caught on film in its entirety. So the world had an opportunity to have a front row seat and watch this tragedy occur.
And find out that all of our brothers ain't been lying. All of our sisters have not been. Okay.
Well, this is where I'm going. And to have this front row seat and watch this and witness it. And the kind of to tag in on what you were just saying is this is something that we have witnessed throughout history in our communities. And so for me, when I watched it, I was both saddened because the loss of life, but I was also encouraged because no one could watch that incident and make any excuse for any of those cops that were on scene.
I hear you.
And in my opinion, it's the first time that I could remember in recent times where everyone is on the same page.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is community and law enforcement. Everybody's on the same page. So, you know, that was incredible for me. Are you guys getting any kind of feedback?
No, sir, we don't hear it. No, we don't hear it.
Okay, I got it. Okay, and so the second part of your question, you talked about building trust in the community, healing the community. Okay, so you know, policing has always been a challenge. Particularly,
before you put the gas on that, have you personally experienced any slight or any negative interaction out of uniform when you weren't? Have you ever had a negative experience with the police? I just want to build to how we heal.
Absolutely. From childhood to adulthood, and even in my current position, I've had these negative or less than positive interactions with law enforcement. You know, I will say this: the balance for me growing up is my parents. Whenever I did have these encounters with the police, and I felt as if though I was mistreated, or my rights were violated, or the cop was less than professional, they would listen to my issue and they would try to explain it to me so I can process it. And my parents were very, very transparent and very, very upfront. And they're big social justice activists in their younger days and throughout their careers as well. So they would give me a very real perspective on those issues. But in addition to that, the other side of it, I had an uncle. His name was Earl Walker, and he was the first Black lieutenant of the West Palm Beach Police Department, and an extremely decorated officer and well respected. And I would have these conversations with him, and he would add context to it. So I would have a greater understanding. And I think what that did for me, as opposed to saying, well, I hate the police, I don't like the police because of how I was treated or my experiences, it gave me an understanding and a balance. So I was able to say, okay, well, this cop is bad, this cop is good. They all aren't bad. My uncle is a good man, and he's working and doing the right thing for the community that he grew up in. And I have a great deal of respect for him, and I see how the community respects him as well. The additional thing about him, he was the first Black lieutenant to have an integrated platoon or squad to head that up. So that was kind of an interesting set of circumstances for him as well.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but so I get it, that a part of your interactions have been both negative and positive.
Yes.
And hear you say then, even from childhood, that you had negative interactions with the police,
sure.
that potentially could frame the mindset of children could potentially frame the mindset of individuals. However, you had something to counter that. You have the ability to counter that with a positive influence.
Absolutely.
That's fortunate for you, but I'm in Liberty City, right? The work that I do, I'm committed to serving the children, families of Liberty City.
Sure.
And they don't necessarily have that point of reference that I got an uncle or a cousin. Now, the point of reference they do have is Peter in Junebug has encountered the police because they're behind bars. And so my question to you then is, I guess, really driving, understanding who you are. Do we have someone in leadership at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement who has a level of sensitivity and understanding? That's really the drive of my question.
Sure.
Understanding that. Talk to me a little bit about, and that's why I asked, what was your experience? Because Breonna Taylor, right? She was an employee of law enforcement, but yet she died at the hands of law enforcement. And there are those in law enforcement who are trying to justify that death. And so I think in order for us to have a community like us, I'm sorry, I'm talking too much because this is really about you, but you got to know at 5 years old, I was here when the McDuffie riots happened, right? My mama was on the double, and I was scared that my mama wasn't going to come back to me. So I saw in Liberty City, right, the negative interaction as a child. That story is a little bit different. I saw the negative interaction between cops and my people and my cousins, right? I saw how a Black man died in this community. I think because of that, we are light years ahead of many as it relates to building quality relationships between law enforcement and the community. But we ain't lost, because we just saw something in Miami Gardens or something here a month or so ago where you guys were investigating some cops, right? We just saw back in, you said 2014, you took on this role. That was right after all of the Overtown shootings had just happened between cops. So you got to talk to me for real, Mr. Walker. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got to be accountable to the people who are watching. We have somebody who is sensitive enough to understand the reality of our community. That's what I'm asking you.
Well, and here's my approach to leadership here in this position. I am very unorthodox in my approach to running this region in this seat. How I do things is very unique for my organization. But being that you hit a point, you said, well, you're a Black man in this position. So, what's your perspective? How do you feel? Well, the Black community has been so good to me growing up, supporting me in all of my ventures and all of my efforts. And one of the things that I promised when I got in this position, I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to, whatever community, but particularly the Black community, I wanted to be a listening ear and also be a voice, to be able to carry the message forward when there are issues. And I want to be a trusting partner with the community, where folks can come to me and feel and understand that I'm detached from their local agency, and I have my own set of rules and mission that I follow, an agenda that I follow.
And we get it, Mr. Walker. You've got to be a professional. You've got to be able. You can't be biased in your approach.
No, not at all.
To deliver justice, because at the end of the day, here go another one of them Alabama, city country. Right don't wrong nobody. There. Right is not wrong anybody. Right is right and wrong is wrong. Right. And so I get that. I just want to add that I'm not minimizing or trying to reduce who you are as a professional, because we didn't get a chance to talk about what your journey has been like to get to become the special agent in charge. I mean, I've done a little research on you, so I know you started off as a trooper, right? As a state trooper, and you had to do some things. You were a
Police,
cop, and then
police department.
police department. Pardon me. So you've earned your stripes,
Yes.
you know, and so I get it. But again, to continue your point about health and healing of the community, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add that. I don't want to reduce that at all.
Yeah, and no, and you know, and just to add a little bit more, you asked about. Go ahead.
I was saying you were saying you were trying.
I couldn't hear you. What did you say?
I said you were saying that you created a culture within FDLE since you're stepping on. That's what you were saying.
Yes. And you know, you asked me the question about being a Black man in this position, and I can tell you, it's a very unique dichotomy, and from this perspective. So, in the position, I could be labeled by the community as being a particular whatever that I may not be. But when I take off all of this and I have on my shorts and sneakers and flip flops and I'm just got, you know, off duty and I'm just doing my normal routine in life, I'm also labeled. So when I see things like abuse in the community, or let's say over policing in the community, it brings about that unique dichotomy. Meaning I am law enforcement, I see that this isn't right, and it brings about, you know, those questions internally, and which goes back to me being in this position that I'm currently in, and being able to have a voice and being able to contribute to trying to develop some sort of reformation or change within a system. And really, that's what brought me to this particular agency from the beginning, because of things that I used to see in my community, and you know, I wanted to make a difference. So I thought about, okay, in law enforcement, what agency will tackle these challenging issues? And that's what brought me to Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And I tell you, I've been with this agency for about 23 years. But I've been in law enforcement in total 30. Wow. So, you know, I've seen a lot. I've seen the evolution of this profession. You know, going back from the early 90s to today, the way we do business is extremely different. And I must give the agencies here in South Florida kudos, because there is so much that is done right here in these 4 counties by law enforcement agencies. Not perfect. There's no utopia, but I will say one thing that, and this is part of what we're doing right now, forums like this, law enforcement here in South Florida, and particularly here in Dade County, you don't shy away from hard conversations.
You gotta
because this is the only way that we grow and we get better and have a greater understanding for one another. You know, you talk about building trust and healing the community. So, you know, I was going, when I started out to say policing has always been a challenge, and particularly with bridging the gap between community and law enforcement. And what we're experiencing today, you know, you talk about today's environment, this ain't nothing new. This is nothing new at all. And if you think about, and I'm dating myself, you know, Latasha, you way, way younger than I am, but I'm dating myself during the 60s.
I like it when you lie so good.
During the 60s, the same protesting that we see today, the same protesting is the same issues that were protested back then. Social justice, civil rights, there were environmental issues. There was also the anti-war movement. There were women rights. There were gay and lesbian rights. You know, the same exact things that we're wrestling with today. And that's in the 60s. So none of this is new. You know, it's social change. And, I think when you look at these issues, you say, okay, well, what's the solution, or what can we do? We've diagnosed, we know that there's a problem. So what are some of the solutions? So if
But Mr.
we
Walker,
look at, yeah, go ahead.
just say this as you continue on with diagnosis, but there are some things that are different because we have been afforded, people like you and I are sitting in positions and have been given platforms that in the 60s and 70s people did not have. And so because of that, we have a level of
absolutely.
We have a level, I believe, a level of responsibility to be able to bridge gaps, as you suggested earlier, and have conversations that are uncomfortable. Because we cannot, as I suggested earlier, we cannot, look, see, that's what I get for eating while I'm talking. We cannot negate or minimize the fact that when we walk in certain rooms, we are the chocolate chip in the milk. Now, I have some shock factor, right? We have to acknowledge the fact that we're walking in spaces and places that people only long and dream of being. And so as we sit in these spaces and we walk, we cannot reduce the fact that by the grace of God, I've been given this moment to be a time and atmosphere shifter. And maybe I'm the voice that these people need to hear at this time. Do you ever feel that way as you walk into certain rooms and spaces? Because I must admit, as I looked over the other Florida Department special agents in charge, I got to do my Google search, looking around. I got to be educated when I come to this conversation, right?
Yes.
I don't want. We need to know you, Mr. Walker. Liberty City want to know who you are, and if you sitting in this space, how you sitting in that seat, sir? Talk to us. I want to know how you sit in the seat. You see me wiggling in mine. How you sit in yours?
Yeah. Well, no, and you make a very good point, Latasha. Our agency was created in 1968, and yes, if you Googled our organization and you looked at my colleagues throughout the rest of the state, as I mentioned, there are 7 regions, and Miami is one of the 7. Yes, I am the only African American special agent in charge. I will say here, my region is very diverse, particularly as it relates to the rest of our region statewide. And yes, it brings about a number of challenges, but one of the things that I appreciate, and you said earlier, that we have a seat at the table and a voice. So when I am sitting in a room with my colleagues and I voice my opinion, it's respected. And it brings about a different perspective on some issues. And, you mentioned earlier too, sometimes we're more alike than different. And but there are certain perspectives that I bring to this work that we do that's going to be different because of my life experiences and some of the challenges that I've had.
We're glad to know you're not scared. That? We're glad to know.
No, not at all.
And that's what
not at all. And I say this, I do things. I enjoy having these types of dialogues, and I'm engaged with a number of different grassroots organizations here in the Miami-Dade area, Broward and Palm Beach. But I will say,
you need to share that because you got to share how you're involved, because that's one of the comments, and I'm kind of stealing Cedric's thunder, but that's one of the questions that come up in the comment section. They want to know, how often are you involved in communities like Liberty City or in the community? When do you step outside of your office? So you need to talk to us a little bit about that. Go ahead.
Often, and most activists, whether it be the NAACP with Reuben Roberts, or whether it be Leroy Jones with the Circle of Brothers, or whether it's Dr. Planton and Jessica Sinkfield, with the CRB, or a host of other grassroots organizations, to include yourself, Latasha. I'm always at the ready. And whenever there's a question or concern in the community, I don't just want to talk to one of those leaders of the organizations that's asking me the questions. I come out and I'm there in person, and I explain whatever the concerns are. And in a lot of instances, I may, like, say, for example, there was an officer-involved shooting that occurred in Liberty Square, and there was a great deal of concern in the community about this particular shooting. And one of the narratives that was being pushed in the community is that this young man, it was a black male, that he was handcuffed and he was running away from the police, handcuffed, and he was shot in the back. And I can see well, that would be an extreme concern to the community. So I spoke with Brother Leroy, and I said, listen, I'll come out, and in fact, I'm going to bring video footage because I want to show you. Because the last thing that I want to happen in our communities is for information that is inaccurate to continue to circulate. And so as a part of an educational process, and also seeking truth and ensuring that our communities know exactly what happened, this is what we do. And I'm a little bit unorthodox, because if you think about the past, when an officer-involved shooting or a critical incident used to occur, you would see the agency head say, here's what happened, very limited information, ongoing investigation, can't tell you anything else. Well, we go much further than that, because it's, in my opinion, the community has a right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Excuse
me?
So
you're saying if there is a question that the community has, you as the special agent in charge of Florida Department of Law Enforcement, especially here in Palm Beach, in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties, you are willing to step outside of your comfort zone. You will come to the community and have conversations. Is that what you're saying to us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do it time and time again. In fact, I just had one at a church in Liberty City last Wednesday night. It was a group that Pulse.
At Jordan Grove.
Pulse on Jordan Grove. Yeah, Jordan Grove Church. And I went and met with a group there, and they had questions, they had concerns, and it was about process. And I took the time out. We must have started that meeting at, I don't know, maybe 6 o'clock. We didn't finish up to about 9:30. So one of the things I don't do when I go out to these meetings, I don't clock watch, because I feel like it's more important to make sure the community understands. And if I can help add a little bit of context to a process that, otherwise no one would typically do, that's what I'm going to do, because I've been put in this position and I'm charged with doing that. This is the type of, this is what motivates me. This is the compassion piece. I feel while I have been given this opportunity, that I can make change. And this is why I try to make myself accessible and try to give the best information that I possibly can about situations or incidents that otherwise normally the community wouldn't have that kind of information.
That kind of dialogue. So listen, I got a video. You don't know about this. I want to bring this up. It's about 10 rules of survival that happens if it stops. I want you to look at it. It's something I found on PBS. I want to bring it up. Then we're going to come back and talk about this issue of defunding the police, right?
Okay.
What does that look like? What are the funding sources that happen? Who funds the police? What would it look like in defunding the police? And what are some options? And what role, as we're talking about this kind of citizens review board kind of thing, what would be different between FDLE and the since you guys, again, are the police of the police, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, remember, that's how we think. what would be the difference in accountability? So listen, I'm functioning with technology. We're gonna pay our Nitra hanging out in the background trying to make sure we do this right.
Okay.
Wait. Our Nitras, I'm gonna pull it up and then make it big, but then it's gonna share your screen. Hold on.
Okay.
Work with this. And listen, while I'm doing this, I want to encourage those who are viewing, please generate your questions in that comment section. We're going to have a moment to be able to ask him, Mr. Walker, a few questions. So let me see how I do this. Come on, Tasha, you can do it. You can do all things through Christ who give you strength. Share screen. We're going to keep it simple. Okay, I think I got it. Are you seeing that, Mr. Walker? You guys seeing it?
Okay.
It's not big.
Yes.
Not big.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, let me play.
10 rules. 10 rules.
10 rules.
10 rules of survival.
10 rules of survival if stopped by the police. Number 1, be polite and respectful when stopped by the police.
Be polite.
Be respectful. Remember that your goal is to get home safely.
Your goal is to get home safely.
Your goal is to get home safely. I'm sorry.
Number 2, if you feel your rights have been violated, you and your parents have a right to file a formal complaint with your local police jurisdiction.
Number 3, do not, under any circumstances, get in an argument with the police.
Number 4, always remember that anything you say or do can be used against you in court.
Number 5, keep your hands in plain sight.
Make sure the police can see your hands at all times.
Number 6, avoid physical contact with police officers. Do not make any sudden movements and keep your hands out of your pockets.
Number 7,
Do not.
do not.
Do not. Do not. Do not. Do not.
Do not run, even if you are afraid.
You're afraid.
Number 8, even if you believe you are innocent, do not resist arrest.
Number 9, if you are arrested, do not make any statements about the incident until you are able to meet with a lawyer or public defender.
Number 10. Stay calm and remain in control.
Watch your words. Watch your body language.
Watch your emotions. Remember,
Remember,
your goal is to get home safely.
get home.
All right, Mr. Walker.
Okay.
All right. What you think about that?
That is an excellent public service announcement. Excellent. Excellent. And I want to add a couple of things to that. So, being that I have a son, and I used to have these, what I call moments of lecture every night when he leaves the house driving my vehicle. And a lot of those things that were just mentioned in those 10 rules, those are the things that I would tell him. And, you know, as a contrast, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I said, you know, here's the conversation I have with my son when he leaves the house. What type of conversation do you have with yours? So he told me, and it was immensely different. And I explained the reason I have this conversation with my son, because I don't want this to be the last time that I see him when he leaves the house.
But Troy,
And I want him to survive. I want.
But you gotta feel that.
Go ahead.
Why do we even have to have this conversation, right? We can't repair things, but we are looking for people who are like you, the special agent in charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, to drill down into our local police departments to hold them accountable. So is there a level of sensitivity training? I hear you saying you're having a conversation with your son, you're having a conversation with your colleagues, but how is that happening with the chief of police, the director of police for Miami-Dade, the chief of police for Key West or Monroe County. I mean, because when I seen Queen and Sugar, I know you don't know nothing about that. I saw the movie Queen and Sugar, right? The amount of bullets, I'm using some satire here. The amount of bullets that were involved in that, but at the end of it, it was FDLE. I don't know if you know this, but it was FDLE that was on site. They were on site, right? When all of these people were shot, you got to go back and look at it. They had on these big jackets that FDLE. I couldn't wait to have this conversation with you. So, as it relates to the ability, let me just say this, and I know, and that's just theatrics, but the severity of how things are escalated or de-escalated. I want you to know from Liberty City, we're looking for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to hold our police chiefs and directors accountable and how they are handling and de-escalating across this country. But I can only talk about Liberty City, Miami-Dade, right here. We need to know from our people who are watching, do you feel that pain and what kind of sensitivity is being driven down so that 10 rules of survival can potentially become obsolete? That when they see us, when they see people who look like me, who look like you, it's not shoot and then ask questions later. I put a lot out there, but talk to me. Talk to me about that.
Well, let me. I want to cover everything that you just said, but I want to finish my thought about these 10 rules of survival. So it's in case there are some folks that are watching that have concerns or additional questions about it. I want to cover that. So. Another couple things that I think that anybody should be cognizant of during a traffic stop. You know, they mentioned both hands on the steering wheel. They mentioned being respectful, being compliant, don't be physically aggressive, don't run, and all of those types of things. But it's a couple of issues, a couple of things that I think also that are very, very important. When the officer is walking up to the vehicle, make sure all your windows are down. Whether you're in a 2-door or a 4-door, make sure all the windows are down. And here's why. So the cop can see, he can get full visibility of the interior of your car. And that takes the threat level down, the anxiety. Because you got to imagine, you know, and this is the other side of the coin that I think that gets lost. During a traffic stop, you got a lot of anxiety. You got the cop that pulled the person over. He or she has a lot of anxiety. And so does the person that's behind the wheel. So that combination can be set up for an explosion if not handled correctly. So that's just something else that I would.
They're equally scared, right? Let's deal with that because you got people. You know, you got to recognize that. I think that happened in the Philando Castile situation where the man eventually admitted
sure.
He didn't know why he shot him. He was scared. And I get it. It's a human factor. Go ahead.
So here's there's no magical blueprint for success on 100% success on any of this, but these are suggestions to help people out. So you have the windows down so that the officers can have full visibility of the interior of the car. But also when they ask you for that license and registration, don't just reach for it. Even though they're asking, don't just reach for it. There is a case in South Carolina, you can Google it. There was a black male that was stopped in his truck. The officer said, let me see your license and registration. Time he reached for it, he was shot in the back. And the interesting part about it, the guy who was shot was apologizing to the cop. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have did that. He had no reason to apologize, but I digress. So you ask, okay, my license and registration is in my glove box. My license and registration is in my console. It's in my back pocket. It's overhead. Do you mind if I get it? Yeah, so you grab it. And then at that point, things may go, hopefully things go in its proper course. And then you leave, they leave, and you have your day in court. If you get a ticket, or if, as they mentioned in those 10 points, if you feel as if though you were mistreated or violated, or the cop was less than professional, you have an outlet where you can complain. And lastly, as it relates to these officer involved, the traffic stops, is that it takes so much energy to be adversarial than it does to be cooperative. So I would stress that, be cooperative, but in the same breath, know your rights. So you talked about Queen Sugar, right? Oh, Slim and Queen. What was it, Queen?
Listen, I'm actually, I'm talking about Slim and Queen, or Queen and Slim and
Queen. Okay. So
hold on.
Right.
Hold on, let me ask Cedric.
So
What's the people name? Hold on. What was the name of it?
It's Slim and Queen, right?
What you say, Cedric? Why are you muted, handsome? Hold on, I got to, let me unmute your mic. You got to unmute your mic on your side. So bye. Get your questions ready because we coming back to you. Go ahead, Special Agent Walker. Go ahead, sir. It's on you.
So going back to that. So I've seen the movie. I've seen the movie several times, and in fact, one of the presentations that I do to our youth, that I provide to the youth, I use that first incident, that traffic stop. That's a part of the presentation. That's the very first thing that I show kids, that when I'm doing this presentation, they watch it, and then once the shooting happens, I stop it and I ask them, what's their opinion? What's your thoughts? What went right? What went wrong? Who do you think was in the wrong? Who do you think was in the right? And they provide their honest opinions, and then we go from there with the discussion. And I tell you, when you look at these types of incidents, they're fairly complicated in nature, especially when you're looking at the application of the law and you're looking at police procedure. And also, as we're navigating these investigations, we have to be cognizant of, Policeman Bill of Rights, qualified immunity, and a host of other things dealing with the union and collective bargaining and so forth. So, it's not this simple thing that we look at a video and we make a decision and say, oh yeah, guilt or innocence, or justified or not. So hopefully that answers some of that question that you asked.
Okay, yeah, to some extent. I think you're saying that there is a accountability process. There are processes to properly processing those who potentially have used excessive force.
Sure.
And the again, addressing the matter of sensitivity training and ensuring that those who are engaged with police, and they understand that Black, brown minorities aren't automatically to be shot and gunned down, but there is a level of sensitivity that is being taught. And again, since you are Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and those chiefs have some significant accountability to you, I wanted to know what levels or what measures are in place for Key West, Monroe, Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. What are some things coming from FDLE to ensure that level of sensitivity is happening? That's my question.
Okay. Well, from not just my 4 counties, but all 67 counties in the state of Florida, every sworn officer here in the state of Florida, local and state agencies or officers, they are required, it's mandatory for them to have at a minimum 40 hours of human diversity, sensitivity training, implicit bias training every 4 years. That's mandatory. But it's in my opinion that, the educational process should be continual. So it's never enough. And what we do, we're consistently, just like most law enforcement agencies, consistently evaluating and assessing our overall performance and trying to identify gaps, whether it be training, services delivered, policy, or equipment. we want to ensure that we're operating at the optimum level, and with local agencies that particularly response agencies like a City of Miami, a Miami-Dade PD, or a host of other agencies, beach, whatever, agencies within Miami-Dade County, they offer additional training on top of that to ensure that their folks are trained up. But I think it's a constant reinforcement. It's not just something that we do once and just kind of forget about it and think that, okay, we've been through this training course, so we have an understanding or what have you. There's a constant reinforcement, and there's also additional classes or courses or training that's made available opportunity for the agencies to do.
Well, that's good to know that there is a formal process, but we also understand, as we started kind of talking about the George Floyd matter, that there were other cops that were around who watched this tragedy take place, and understanding how do we weed out. And I see on our stream that we have several other law enforcement, which we're glad that they're a part of this conversation that we're monitoring. I just know, again, some things by professionalism, and you're talking in an ideal situation that everybody is coming from a good place. They're non-confrontational. They're not bringing their implicit or explicit bias to the scenario. We're kind of in a euphoric situation if it was ideal. What are some measures and what safety measures or precautionary measures are in place through FDLE that would potentially allow them a safety net? If I see that my agency or my department is not necessarily abiding by all that happens, is there a place that a cop can come if they know that there is a culture that kind of looks over when things, as it relates potentially to Black and brown or minority issues? That is there a place that cops can come to you? What agencies are in place? I don't understand hierarchy and how that works, but we know that in the workplace, it may not manifest on the street at first. It happens in the break room. It happens in conversations before it manifests out there. So I hope my question makes sense. I'm just trying to.
It does.
I want to make sure, number one, that our audience, and I'm so thankful for those who are watching. Again, guys, put those questions in. I see we got several comments coming in, and then we're going to wrap this up because I would only ask you for an hour, and I know you're a busy man. So I got to bring Cedric on so he can ask some questions with you. So help me, because I need this audience to know who is the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and what can we rely? And then more specifically, can they call you? Do they call you if something happens?
Absolutely.
If they feel that the cops on this level at Miami-Dade County, city, whatever, they feel neglected or they feel that they have been a victim, is there a victim advocacy there with you? I asked questions. I'm sorry.
No. Very, very good question, because a lot of people don't differentiate or they don't make the discernment, the difference between an internal issue, which would be a policy violation or an administrative action by a local law enforcement officer contingent upon their policies of their agency, versus criminal. We only, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, we only look at criminal cases. We don't do internal affairs investigations, only criminal cases. And there's an avenue for anyone, not only law enforcement, but for anyone, citizens alike, to come to us. And if they have an issue, and particularly if they think it is criminal in nature, at least you have a listening ear. And we go forward from there. I get tons of calls from people, whether it's citizens or sometimes even from law enforcement officers, and they tell me about a scenario, and I give them my assessment. And sometimes there is a criminal case to be made. You mentioned the Miami Gardens case. That was one where a citizen called us. But I also want to say this: a lot of the chiefs, they call me and say, I have a problem. Can you help me out? Absolutely. What do you have? And it's a criminal case involving one of their own. So the
you
chief,
become a balancing act for them. And then,
absolutely.
and it's especially good to note that you opened by saying that this isn't just accountability with police, but it's also accountability for those who are in public service, for those, any of our elected officials and all of that. If there is some sense of corruption or behavior, that FDLE is a part of that conversation for that. All right.
And if you don't mind, Latousha, I want to share an example of a law enforcement officer and family coming forward on an issue that was kind of delayed, so to speak. So I think several of you all may have seen the article or reference Biscayne Park Police Department. So more than 3 years ago, we received a complaint, and one of the family members talked about their son, and their son didn't do the crime that he was in prison for. And if you think about it, a lot of times that will fall on deaf ears, correct? So we listen. And as we developed more information, we found that it was more than just that one young man that had been falsely accused of something that he did not do. We actually found 3 other examples, but we used 2 in particular. And through this investigation, we were able to, one of the officers from that agency also provided information. And what it was these 3 young men were arrested for burglaries, vehicle and home burglaries within that community because there was a problem. And the city structure, obviously, just like any mayor or a city manager would ask the police chief, hey, what are you doing about this problem? We got to reduce this. So instead of doing things the right way, the chief decided to do it the wrong way. And he charged young men with these crimes and declared victory in a press conference. Well, fast forward, we get the complaint and the investigation, and we figure out that these young men never committed the crimes. So the roles reversed. So the young men were released, and guess who's in prison? So the officers that committed those crimes, including the chief, they are in prison. So, there's an avenue, and we take these issues very, very seriously. But, I have to say this because I think it's very important. When a complaint comes to us, one of the things I tell the community, and I tell both law enforcement as well, I said, I'm hoping that this discussion that we're having, that we're on the same page, meaning what we want to seek is truth and justice. What that looks like at the end, you have to accept it. So if it's whether we're going to indict or arrest, or we say, based on the complaint, based on the investigation, here's what we uncovered, and those particular allegations may or may not, they're not true in this particular instance. So, but we're very transparent on that as well. So, but you do have a listening ear here at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, whether you're a citizen or whether you are law enforcement, we're here to be of assistance.
Well, let me wrap up with 2 questions, and then I'm bringing Cedric on. Well, I'm just going to do one because there are questions coming in about mental health. There are a lot of questions coming in about professional demeanor. I know we all a little ta-ta, but we need to make sure those who are carrying a badge and all that are what's those steps. I do want to also make note again about several years ago when I first met you, there was a shoot and don't shoot kind of scenario that allows citizens to be a participant to see those split second questions and moments that a person has to decide if they want to shoot someone or if they should shoot, to analyze the scenario. But let me ask you directly a question about the whole matter, which is surrounded by Black Lives Matter, and then we're gonna start bringing this to a close, about the defunding of police and what that looks like, and what is that, and what does that mean? Let me allow you to have that moment with us, and then right after that, I want to bring on Cedric. We'll put those questions up on the screen and allow Cedric to read those questions to you in response to that. Okay.
And I want to say, if we can't get through all of the questions that Cedric has, you send them to me. I'll provide you with answers, and you can provide them to the viewers at some point on your site. So if it's something applicable to what we do. So you're talking about the defund police. Well, I will say this: I applaud our youth with the energy that they have and the social consciousness that they have and how they want to impact or affect change. But I also would like to suggest that being well informed on issues, and you mentioned, what does defund the police, what does that actually look like? Or what are you actually asking? And I think that question has somewhat been answered, but it's still a little bit aloof. But I will tell you what my perspective is, and then from my seat. When you talk about defund the police, I've heard everything from get rid of the police department, and we should have social workers or some other form of response. So I had a conversation with a couple of our very energetic and intelligent young men and women about this issue. And I asked them, I said, so how does this look? What's the response look like on this issue? So you have a domestic, a husband and wife that's in a argument, and it turns physical. So now you get this 911 call or whatever system, the defund the police, and the police aren't available. Now it goes to whatever system you've put in place. Who's going to respond? Well, we can have a social worker that can respond. Okay, so when the social worker shows up and the male half of that domestic come out with an AK-47 pointing at the social worker chest, what are they going to do? Absolutely nothing but run for cover. So I think we have to be careful with what we're asking. And I don't think it's an outrageous concept, but I think we got to put it in perspective. Meaning, the way I see it is, I look at budgets. I look at, as a part of my job, we have what's called a Regional Domestic Security Task Force. And I have a sheriff to sit with me on this committee. And it's a region-wide body, multidiscipline body, from fire rescue, emergency management, law enforcement, intel community, campus, security, you name it, that are a part of this group, and the various committees, even fire rescue, that sort of thing. So during the funding cycle, all of these committees, they take somewhat of a survey, and they look at what's important within our region and what can we do to fill gaps and to make sure that the citizens within these 4 counties are safe from a terrorism standpoint, or vulnerabilities with soft targets. So they send these templates through for me to review and approve, so we can push them forward. And then at the statewide level, I argue for this region and say, here's why we need this money. So let me give you an example for defund the police. So let's say I get a template from, I don't know, let's say any police department here in Dade County. And they say, okay, Mr. Walker, here's what I need. I like to get 2 military style vehicles. I like to get new SWAT uniforms for everybody. I like to get these new assault rifles for every officer here, and all this other stuff, the militarization of law enforcement, all of these things, right? So looking at it from a defund police perspective, with this example that I'm giving you, what I would say is, okay, well, let's not do all of those things this year. Why don't we do this? Why don't we invest in technology? for your officers? Why don't we invest in tech and in training for your officers? Why don't we invest in maybe some other tools that give them the ability to do their job better right here on the ground with the citizens? And then lastly, let me say this, Latasha. And then lastly, let's take some of those funds and let's create an initiative to bridge the gap between community and law enforcement. So when you look at defunding the police, that's how I see it. That you appropriate those dollars that may have in the past go towards a particular line item request and say, no, let's shift those dollars into something that may be a little bit more meaningful in this period of time, and that can help us with some grassroots efforts here on the ground. Because you have some wonderful organizations here in Dade County that is doing incredible work. And I will tell you this, including you and your folks, but I will tell you this, if I could bottle up what these grassroots organizations are doing here in Dade County, just bottle it and package it up and sell it to the rest of the country or the rest of the state, I mean, it would make an incredible difference, because this, what we're doing right now, this doesn't occur all over the state. I think we take a lot of things for granted here in South Florida because it's such a norm for us. I mean, we can have these conversations. You can call me direct and say, hey, Troy, I need this. Any other chief of police, the directors, hey, I need this. I'm interested in this. And I can do the same with all of you all. And that's a very unique set of circumstances, because relationships aren't like that everywhere else, not only in the state of Florida, but throughout the country.
Yeah. I think it's necessary. I think you're right. And that's why I referenced the McDuffie riots and being a part of the reality of being in this community to see the evolution of police. Sure. And again, I'm responsible for Liberty City as it relates to how we deliver our work and how we see those relationships play out. But I think I finally heard, we got to a point where I heard you, where you were suggesting that we have someone, special agent in charge of Florida Department of Law Enforcement, who is amenable to hearing conversation about the necessity to which the defunding police conversation began. And that is moving resources to properly engage and support the quality of relationships that need to happen. Now, what that framework looks like is above my pay grade, and I surely know that you're accountable to the governor, that you work alongside Carlos Martinez, the public defender, as well as Catherine Fernandez Rundle, as it relates to prosecution and defense. And so I'm glad to know that. So I'm glad at least we know that, Mr. Walker, you're having conversation or a thought process about the necessity to move resources to those grassroots organizations and those who are within the community. I absolutely concur with you as it relates to sending a social worker when I'm getting my butt beat at the house. Well, they ain't gonna beat my butt. Well, anyway, if they touch me, they gonna know that they've been in the battle with a black woman. If it's gonna be a cut, a bruise, or something, they gonna know when the police show up. They gonna ask, well, who was the aggressor? Because it's going. But you understand, if somebody, police come to my house because of a domestic situation, then of course I want someone who can shift that situation. And so I don't want somebody to show up and shoot my bae, my boo, just because we arguing. At the end of the day, I still want him to be alive, right? But I don't want him shot just because in my community, it's perceived that just because we're engaged in a different level of conversation, that I automatically know potentially that my companion is going to die. But if it's over in Key Biscayne, or if it's over on Marco Island, they potentially are just going to get, sat down on the side of the curb. So it's good to know that we've got somebody, Mr. Troy Walker, a African-American man, the first African-American man to hold the office of Special Agent in Charge of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I salute you, sir, for this work. I asked you some hard questions. I think you were comfortable. I talked about wiggling in your seat. You seem to be comfortable in your seat. I'm glad to know that you're not afraid to have hard conversations. I look forward to that. Now I'm going to bring on Mr. Cedric. You look like you want to say something. Hold on.
If you don't mind. So that example I gave you about defund the police, that's just an example, and I just as an illustration. But I want to make it clear, I don't control the budgets of a City of Miami Police Department or Miami-Dade Police Department. Those police departments control their own budget, and they get their budgets through their city structure, county structure. You know that, and they make those decisions based on their priorities. So FDLE doesn't tell them how to spend their money. So I just don't want that to be the wrong, the wrong impression is put out there about it. But I do, and if you're unaware, there is a panel that has been brought together to discuss police reform, and part of the facilitation of it is with one of our assistant commissioners in Tallahassee, and some of the local chiefs here within our region are sitting on that panel. Also clergy, my pastor, Pastor Jackson, he sits on that panel, and Arthur Jackson III, Antioch Missionary Baptist Church. And
we glad to know we got a Christian man that's in the.
I'm a deacon at that church.
Pastor Jackson for the work that he's doing in the community.
Absolutely, and also Dr. Shirley Planton, who's the director of the CRB here in Miami-Dade. She sits on that, and I think it's important to have those voices. So I was extremely glad that we have folks from South Florida that's sitting on this panel, because they're looking at police reform statewide. So it's very good to have those voices on there. And then also not only law enforcement, but you have, like I said, you have clergy, and you also have members of organizations that see these things from a different perspective. So I just wanted to add that. Sorry.
All right. So I brought Mr. Cedric Dawkins. Listen, Troy, you have been phenomenal. Mr. Walker, thank you in this moment with Coffee with a Cop. I think we got a better stance and understanding of who FDLE is. So let's start some of these questions, and then we're gonna wrap this up. All right, let me see how we bring those questions on the screen.
I had a personal question before we get to the Facebook questions. I wanted to ask you, Mr. Walker, is there a proportionate mandate, or do you think that will be effective where a certain department should hire a certain amount of officers that are from that community?
That mirror the community. Interesting.
Because some police departments recruit nationwide, and then these guys, they come there, or young ladies as well, come to the department. They don't know the area, so that's one of the reasons I feel like a lot of times they're just, I don't want to say trigger happy, but they're just, they jump. Whereas if they were from the community, they would be a little more comfortable. And I just think it starts from a lower temperature if some of the people were from the community. Is there any kind of mandate for police departments?
No, there isn't any mandate, but I will tell you, Cedric, I'm a firm believer in law enforcement agencies. They should reflect the community that they serve. And sometimes there's difficulties with recruiting. I mean, one of the biggest hurdles or biggest challenges that I see is trying to overcome that the trust piece that so many of us or people of color have with law enforcement, that trust factor. So that's one of the challenges when you're talking about bringing minorities into this chosen career path. Not to take up too much time, but what happens and what we talked about a little bit earlier about personal experiences. Sometimes I think law enforcement officers forget the power that they actually have and the influence that they actually have over another person's life. And some of those experiences are long lasting, because I can tell you, Some of the scars that I have from some of the experiences, I mean, I revisit them all the time, but I keep in mind there's a balance here. So, you know, these are certain hurdles, but I will tell you what you just said as far as reflecting the community and actually recruiting young men and women that are from that area. Oh man, that's idea if you can do it, because that makes a huge difference in trust factor. So, you know, a lot of times we have these incidents that occur in our communities, these tragic homicides or shootings, and there's no information that's provided. And we all know the streets talk. Someone knows. So if there was
WW, I ain't gonna tell you something news.com.
well, the streets talk, but if you think about it, if you can build that and you have that level of trust, someone gonna call you with that information and say, look, let me tell you, I don't want to be a witness, I don't want to you know, testify in court, but let me give you a roadmap.
Right.
And these are the things that I think, these are some of the challenges that we have in law enforcement. And your point is excellent. If we could do a better job, and this is all agencies nationwide, no one agency is immune, you know, and, you know, you look at it from this perspective, even in personal relationships, communication and trust are vital, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
So community and law enforcement, they're not immune to that. Those same attributes, those things have to exist too in order for it to work. So that's my 2 cents to that.
Well,
Absolutely. And seeing that in communities like Liberty City are key. All right, Cedric, I am going to go off screen so we can help generate those questions. What time are we at right now? We're at 11:30. Oh my gosh.
Right.
Who
We're
knew?
getting to the end. I know.
It's supposed to be an hour conversation, but let's bring up some of those questions, if you don't mind. Let me bring this up. All right, here's one. Go ahead, Cedric.
Okay, this one says, how often are officers checked for mental health issues? You kind of touched on it earlier, but is there like every so often, like almost like how you get an annual physical? Is there something where they may get an annual mental check or cognitive check, and you know, along with their physical?
Sure. Well, again, that's one of those things. That's a policy-driven question for each individual organization. You know, ours may be different from, you know, Miami Beach or North Miami or Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office or what have you. So they all vary when it comes to that. Initially, coming into the job, all of those things are done. That's consistent. But as far as how it's done after the fact, when you get in critical incidents, yes, everyone has to get a you know, have some sort of counseling. But I will say this: certain squads that I have, because of the nature of the work that they do, they have to go see a psychiatrist every 6 months.
Okay.
And it's because of the nature of the work that they do,
Right.
and I'm always concerned about their well-being.
Yeah,
So
to make sure they're not getting have any like inner stress that they, you know,
right, inner stress
release.
or feelings that, you know, that I like to catch it on the front end as opposed to on the back end, and it's in the newspaper, and now I'm embarrassed for an action. So we do that every 6 months for certain units within our organization.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I have one other question I want to ask. So, and this is like for a lot of the viewers, you know, there's a lot of videos that always go around on Facebook and different social media platforms where you see suspects who are not of color. I mean, they do everything from punch police officer, kick them, do all kind of stuff, and nothing. But if a suspect of color, you know, like we talked about earlier, they flinch, you know, they could potentially, you know, face a fatal situation. And you talked about the cultural and sensitivity training. How is that somehow, you know, implemented in that training that you kind of need to give everybody? I mean, I know there's life and death situations that occur, but to give everyone some level of, you know, benefit of the doubt before the decision is made to make something fatal.
Well, I'll say this. That's a very good question. And I think when we look at these videos, we're looking at it from a national perspective in most instances, not necessarily the micro, which would be our area that of where we live, where we work, and the areas that we're concerned in. But it somehow translates to some of the stuff that happens here in our area, but just not on a grand scale like what we see nationally. But I think that there are accountability measures in place with every single organization. And just like any other profession, cops are human, and they make bad judgment calls or bad decisions, and those things can be fairly costly at times. So when we see these issues, typically the agency, they start implementing whatever their process may be. And when you see something that may be criminal in nature, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, can we talk to you about this? Absolutely. And then we start looking at it from a criminal perspective. We work the investigation, then we submit it over to Kathy Rundle's shop for decision for a decision on charging or not.
Well, that's good to know that there is what that process looks like. All right, come on, guys, we're gonna wrap this up. Let's get this question here about a potential conflict resolution. Go right ahead, Cedric.
Okay. A gentleman wants to know conflict resolution for couples as a court diversion would be a good reallocation of community safety funds with regard to defunding the police. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think when a county looks at their overall budget, they have to look at what their priorities are, and if this is something that they think that would make an impact to reduce criminal activity, or reduce violence, or something that would benefit the community, that may be something that the county want to invest in. But I'm sure there's a tremendous amount of priorities that they have, and we all have shrinking budgets. So that would be a decision that would be made between those agencies within the county and the organizations that are requesting those dollars as a funding stream to move forward with that initiative.
Now, another question I know a lot of people have. Does the FDLE regulate in terms of how many write-ups an officer can have before they, are terminated before these situations? Because a lot of times when they're involved in these situations, when they go in their background, they've had 17 incidents in the past. They've had 13 incidents in the past. At what point, do you reach a maximum where, like a regular job, 3 write-ups and you're fired? With the police department, is there any kind of regulation with that?
Well,
we're gonna make this our last question, okay?
That's a very interesting question, Cedric, and here's why. And that's one of those complex issues. So every department, they have their policies and procedures. We arrested an officer in Fort Lauderdale cop that grabbed the young sister by the back and slammed her forward onto the ground during the protest. She had her hands up. So he had 70 prior offenses.
Wow.
70. So, but what does that look like? That could be a citizen complaint that's not warranted. That could be something that was, and he was sustained on the complaint. But nonetheless, every single agency has their own set of policies and rules where they hold their folks accountable, right? But here's the interesting part where we come into play. So if there is an internal investigation that's done on an officer, and let's say throughout the internal investigation, the officer says, you know what, I'm just going to resign because in lieu of getting fired. That agency, that police chief, is still held accountable by us to ensure that internal affairs is completed and submitted up to us, so it goes in a database, so that nationally other agencies know in the event that this guy goes to another jurisdiction to try to get a job. But here's the complex piece. So if you have a police chief, let's say Freddie or George, Kalina, they fire a guy and they're ready to get rid of him, he has rights to go through this arbitration process. And that's that's when these Policeman Bill of Rights, Florida Statute 112, come into effect. So when you go through an arbitration, the members of that panel, one of the members of the panel is picked by the police union, because part of the collective bargaining agreement between law enforcement agency and the union, there are certain agreements that take place. And that's part of it. So when the community looks and they're like, okay, well, this guy was fired. Yeah, the chief wants him fired. The chief does not want him back. But through arbitration, he gets his job back. And in a lot of instances, they sue the police department.
Yeah.
So that's part of this broken system. When you talk about reform, or you talk about systemic problems within law enforcement, these are some of the things that folks are taking a very hard look at, because it takes away the confidence of the community in the police department because of that piece that's missing. And you think that there's some sort of agenda to cover up for the cop, but really it's not. It's that whole process. And I've seen it happen. It's a cop right now that got his job back, and he was deemed one of the most corrupt cops in the United States at one point, and he got his job back. We arrested him.
Wow, Troy.
And yeah, so anyway,
so
I hope that answers the questions. These are
yes, you put a good shed a new light on the situation. This
has been a phenomenal conversation, guys, and I hope that it continues. And because I think our communities, they deserve to be educated on these processes. They deserve to know that there's an outlet. They deserve to know that there's a vehicle where they can be heard when there's an issue. And so I'm available anytime when we get out of this COVID-19 situation and we have a live, in-person type of town hall or conversation, I'm there for you.
Well, we want to invite you. Next week, we'll be having a youth forum, a youth summit.
Okay.
No, I'm not going to miss my moment. We want to invite you to be a part of that youth summit.
Okay.
We're going to be hosting it right here on Facebook with middle and high school students who have a whole lot of questions and probably some of the same things that we have right now. They're going to want to ask. So we're going to invite you to be a part of that. I also want to put a challenge out there, and I might be putting a man on the spot, but let me just at least try to do my due diligence when given a platform and an opportunity. I ask God this personally, that Lord, always give me, I want to be totally lucid. I want to be present in that moment. And so if I may ask you to consider a citizens panel, if you don't already have it, that would be made up of citizens that could potentially meet with you in forums like this on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, that we just have healthy dialogue. And so that then we can go back to our community and say that we do have conversations. And as issues come up, then we can at least have a tone and tenor to which we understand that we are properly represented at Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We can begin to carve conversation around what that looks like as it relates to community relations, and potentially see how we are part of resolution. I am coming to understand as leader of this wonderful organization called Miami Children's Initiative, that I want to be a leader that creates and not reacts. And so how do we create the environment, the conversation to which we're already prepared when something happens? We're not reacting to it, but we've already developed that level of dialogue and understanding, and potentially benchmarks that we can say this is where we're headed. And should incidents occur, which we pray that we never have a George Floyd. We pray we never have a Breonna Taylor in our community, but should pray tell it happens, we have some systems and conversation. And I know that you're not going to be at FDLE forever, but I will say it does give me a sense of community pride, especially what happened on yesterday with Kamala. It gives me a sense of pride to know that there are people who are regarded because of their level of professionalism and not based on the color of their skin, that they're able to move upwardly and be able to rightfully hold the mantle to which has been given to them. And I think based on this conversation, Mr. Walker, you seem to be the man for the task. We're glad to know that you're a faith man. That means that there is always a room for change should things come to you. To me, that says that you're not a man stuck, but you're a man that is pliable, and so that means you're open to new thoughts and
Absolutely.
concepts. And so that is warm and welcoming. I'm going to get Cedric. I'm going to thank you so much. You always hold it down for me, sir. We'll be coming back. As a matter of fact, we'll be interviewing for our YouTube channel. We have a new television kind of show for our YouTube channel called In Focus. And we'll be having conversation with Carlos Martinez. We actually have that scheduled interview for tomorrow that we'll be producing. So we're having conversations with what we call power brokers and change agents so that then they understand from a Liberty City perspective, a minority perspective, that there are some needed conversations. And so I thank you, Mr. Walker, for being a part. Mr. Cedric, I'm going to say goodbye to you. Thank you for being a part.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the show.
Absolutely.
No, thank you. Thank you for this platform.
All right. Any last words, Mr. Walker, before we close out, sir?
Yeah, a couple of things. One thing I want the community to have, to be reassured that law enforcement agencies down here in South Florida are some of the best law enforcement agencies in the entire country. And you have some of the largest law enforcement agencies here in South Florida as well. And I like the idea that the open dialogue is there, and when there is an issue, nothing falls on deaf ears. And there's some avenue. You mentioned, me being available for some sort of citizen review board or that sort of thing. Well, I am, because with Dr. Planton and Jessica, they call me all the time. And there's a host of folks that sit on those particular panels. And we have these open discussions. It'd be nice if everyone can kind of interface, and we're all, although we're all marching in the same direction, but making sure that everyone hears the same narrative, so to speak. But in closing, one of the things I like to say, and I think it's so important to say this to our youth, that, throughout their life journey, they're going to experience some trials and some pains, and there are going to be some growing pains in a sense. But I want them to know that, all of them have an opportunity for success. And it's just three simple things that they need to do: hard work, sacrifice, and struggle. Those things, are a great recipe for success. Never stop dreaming, educate themselves, be informed, be invested in the process. And that goes for all of us. That means vote. Don't be afraid to explore new ideas and concepts, and use your voice and intellect to affect change. And always remember, respect given, respect received. And I'm always available to any of you all, any time of day or night, whatever you need. And hopefully, I didn't waste any of you all's time. Hopefully we all I know I certainly got something out of this discussion. So I'm hoping that I was a benefit to someone in the listening audience.
I believe you were. We have a better understanding of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. We have a better understanding of what is called, or the person who leads that work, the special agent in charge. We now know that there is an African-American male who has a level of sensitivity to the community. And again, I am signed up for representing voices and thoughts of children and families in Liberty City. And so to know that we have someone who is sensitive, who has experienced both sides of the law, and who is not afraid to ask or be asked difficult questions, and would properly represent us in rooms that are diverse when they may perceive or be perceived as the minority or the unwanted voice. I think we have that. I think we feel that level of confidence with you. I do
Well, thank you.
a few other conversations. I think the people want to see you a little bit more, and but maybe they didn't know how to see you. But I think we let them know that you are accessible. That if there are conversations or thoughts that they can, whether it's from Key West, Monroe, Dade, Broward, or Palm Beach, you are that voice who oversees that face and the spirit to which creates the culture of those who watch and monitor public officials and law enforcement. And so thank you very much, Mr. Walker. You have been truly an encouragement to us. And you just
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. You hold on a minute. Let me just say goodbye to the audience. All right, guys, thank you so much for this is our second edition of Coffee with a Cop. We started a few months ago where we interviewed Chief Charles Press, who heads up the Key Biscayne law enforcement. And we had real conversation, black and white issues about how we respond to George Floyd. We're continuing this conversation as we did today with Mr. Troy Walker, the head of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I call them the police of the police, but he has qualified and helped us to better understand that it's both public officials, law enforcement, cold cases, terrorist acts, and that he's responsible and accountable to the governor. And so I think that gives us an understanding, and we see what he looks like, and we were able to hear. So thank you guys who hung in there. It was only supposed to be an hour show. Let me look and see what time is it. I'm looking at an hour and 45 minute show. Thank you for hanging in here with us. And you'll be able to see this on our YouTube channel. You can follow us again, as you are here on the Miami Children's Initiative. Follow us on my page, Latousha Daniels, or you can follow us as well on Instagram at I Am Liberty City. But you'll be able to see this again on the Miami Children's Initiative Facebook channel. Give us a day to get it uploaded, and then you'll be able to watch it. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you have a great day. Bye-bye. Look, it's lunchtime. Have lunch on me, okay? All right, guys, bye-bye.